In the last video, we looked at how to create labels and buttons and add those to your main window, which was great, but not very interesting because the button didn't actually do anything. You pressed it and nothing happened. So in this video, we're going to look at how we can assign a command to a button so that when you press that button, things happen on the screen. All right, so in order to do that, let's think about what we would like to happen when the button is pressed. So we've got this button from the last video, and it says press me, right? And you do, and disappointingly, nothing occurs. So I would like it to be the case that when you press this button, it changes the text of this label to say that the button was pressed. Okay? So in order to make that happen, I need to write a function that causes that to happen. And then I'm going to bind that function to the button. So let's start by writing that function. Remember, we like to write functions at the top so that all our function definitions are up top and can be used by the whole program and are easy to find. So let's call this function, we can call it whatever we like. I'm going to call it button command. Okay? And it's not going to accept any arguments. And all it's going to do is change the text of the label. Now, I haven't told you how to change the text of a label, but it's very easy, very simple to do. Type the name of the label, dot, and I'm going to sit here for a second. You can see if I wait, it brings up a pop-up of all the possible functions that are associated with a label, and you can see there are a lot of them. So there are a lot of things you can do with labels. What we want to do is use the config function. So I'm just going to type config. Okay, and you see that is one of the options here. And config allows you to set the resources you can see of this widget, the parameters, the properties of this widget. Now, the label that I've created only has one real property, and it's this text. Okay, and I want to talk a little bit about this, the way this is set up here. When we created this label, we used this tk.label. We'll learn about this in second semester if you continue to take the course. But this is essentially a function that creates labels. And it takes one argument here that is the parent, okay, the container, whoever owns this label, in this case the main window. And then it takes what are called keyword arguments. Keyword arguments are optional arguments that allow you to specify certain properties of the thing that you're creating. In this case, we're creating a label. There are lots of properties that we could set, but the only one I cared about was the text property, which specifies what the text of that label is. Now, in most functions, you just list all the arguments with commas, right? So for instance, this createLine function that we used in the canvas, this is an x1, y1, x2, y2. And we separated those with commas, and you can see we don't call them anything. We just put 20, 20, 80, 100, because all of these arguments were required. We couldn't leave any of them out or the function wouldn't work. But in this case, we have these keyword arguments that are optional, right? So for instance, there's a width option here that I don't care about. I'll just let the function or the label figure out how long it has to be based on the text. But I could specify the width if I wanted to. Well, these optional arguments require that they be named, right? And so each of these named properties is called a keyword argument. And so text is a keyword argument. You used these before when we created the canvas, right? Here's a keyword argument. Width equals 600, height equals 300, right? These are keyword arguments. And you can see here as we start to use the config function, it has these star kw. These refer to the keyword arguments. So the keyword argument that I want to change in this case or configure is the text argument, right? And when that button is pressed, I want that label to say button pressed, okay? And so what should happen now when I press this button is that this label will change from here's a label to button pressed. But it's not going to happen yet because I've not specified that the button should be connected to this function. There's nothing connecting this button that I've created to this button command function that I wrote. The way that we do that is through another keyword argument, but this time for the button, right? So I look at the button is owned by the main window. Parent is the main window. It has a keyword argument, also text, for the text of the button, and it says press me. I can specify another keyword argument called command that tells the button what to do. Now, what I want the command to be is the function I just wrote, which is button command. But here's an important point. I'm going to leave off the parentheses here because when I type the parentheses at the end of a function, that means call the function, make the function run. I don't want the function to run right now. I just want to tell the button that this is the function that should run when the button's pressed. So I'm not calling the function, I'm just specifying the function that goes with this button. Let's see what happens when we run it now. Okay, we've got our window. I can see my line, my label, my button that says press me. Everything looks good. And hopefully when I hit press me, the label will change to button pressed. And indeed it does. Okay, so this is how we connect commands to button widgets and other widgets that take commands as well. Now that I keep pressing it, nothing happens because the text is already button pressed, and so it's changing to what it already is. We can do other things as well. Let's create a second button. Call it button 2, and make that a button. Again with a parent of the main window. And I'll make the text this time say, I don't know, don't press me. And we'll give it a command as well. So make this button 2 command. Now I haven't written a button 2 command function yet, so I better go ahead and do that. So we'll go up top here, define a new function, button 2 command. And let's have this do something else. Let's have it say, we'll have it change its own text. Button2.config again. And once again, I'm going to change the text of this button, and I'll make it say, why did you press me? Okay. And if I run this function, or this code now, actually I better make sure I add the button to the main window using the pack command. I'll have yet another button. Run that. Got 2 buttons now, one that says press me, one that says don't press me. If I press the one that says don't press me, it says why did you press me? If I press the one that says press me, it says button pressed. Okay, so we've got multiple things happening. We can have more than one thing happen, right? This function can do all kinds of stuff, right? I could, for instance, change something about the canvas, right? The canvas also has keyword arguments such as width and height, but it's got a background color. So I could make the background green. Okay. And if I run that now, 2 things should happen if I press don't press me. The background turned green and the button changed its text. So these are all the different kinds. There are lots of different other things you can do with buttons, and you should play around and try to figure out what you would like to do and mess around and be creative. But in the next video, we'll be looking at other kinds of events, including keyboard and mouse events that you can use in your applications as well.